There's a moment at the grocery checkout. That quiet second when the total lands and your brain runs math you didn't ask it to run. You tap your card. You absorb it as background noise because prices are just high now, nothing new. But that flicker isn't paranoia. According to research from Harvard's economics department, the average American registers economic contraction through behavioral signals before it ever reaches a headline. 5 of those signals are converging right now in April 2026. They don't look like a crisis. They look exactly like your ordinary Tuesday. And that's precisely why almost nobody sees them coming. The first signal isn't buried in an obscure government database. It's sitting in the quarterly report from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and it has been climbing steadily since the fourth quarters of 2024. Sir, credit card delinquency rates among Americans under 40 hit a 12-year high in the first quarter of 2026. Not because people stopped caring about their financial obligations, because the underlying math stopped working. Wages that grew modestly through 2023 and 2024 have been quietly outpaced by the compounding weight of sustained higher prices across housing, groceries, and energy. These people are not broke yet. They are running on borrowed time, and the credit card balance is the ledger keeping score. But the ledger is only the first place worth looking. The second signal is small businesses. The National Federation of Independent Business reported in March 2026 that small business optimism had fallen for the 4th consecutive quarter, reaching levels last seen in the summer of 2009. That comparison is not trivial. Small businesses employ nearly half of all private sector American workers. When they contract, none of it appears as a headline. A restaurant quietly cuts 2 servers. A contractor stops taking on subcontractors. A boutique shifts to appointment-only hours to cut overhead. Each one is invisible individually. Together, they become a statistic 3 months later. By then, the contraction is already compounding. 2 signals would already be worth paying attention to. But signal 3 is the one economists flag as genuinely strange because it shouldn't be possible. Consumer confidence and consumer spending are actively diverging. According to the University of Michigan's surveys of consumers, overall sentiment in March 2026 dropped to its lowest reading in 14 months. And yet personal spending data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis shows Americans still buying, still swiping, still running balances on cards that are approaching their limits. That gap, feeling deeply uncertain while acting financially normal, is not evidence of resilience. It's evidence of a delay. People are spending ahead of their anxiety, using credit and residual savings to maintain a life their own nervous systems are already flagging as unsustainable. When the adjustment finally happens, it tends to happen fast. And Signal 4 suggests it's closer than the headline number implies. The unemployment rate in April 2026 remains below 4.5%. That's the number you'll hear reported. That's the number that becomes a reassuring graphic on a news broadcast. But underneath it, average weekly hours worked have declined for 3 consecutive quarters. Temporary employment, historically one of the first variables employers reduce before making permanent layoffs, has contracted for 5 consecutive months, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. A 2019 study from the Brookings Institution found that contraction in temporary employment precedes broad unemployment increases by an average of 4 to 7 months. The headline says, stable. The internals have been pointing somewhere else for long enough that the direction is becoming difficult to argue with. Signal 5 requires the briefest translation because it sounds like abstract finance until you understand what it means for the rest of us. The behavior of short-term versus long-term treasury yields has been signaling economic slowdown since February 2026. When institutional investors who move billions of dollars based on economic probability models start rotating into long-term government bonds, they're making a collective bet that growth is going to slow and rates will need to fall. You don't need to understand bond markets to care about that signal. These are the same institutional investors who positioned correctly ahead of 2007. They're not panicking. They're not issuing warnings on television. They're repositioning quietly, deliberately, and early. The absence of alarm is not the absence of information. So 5 separate signals are now active simultaneously. Rising credit delinquency, small business contraction, the confidence spending gap, softening labor internals, and institutional bond market repositioning. And yet almost nobody around you feels alarmed. The reason for that is more precise than most people realize. A 2021 study from Yale's psychology department found that the brain's default operating mode when processing recurring environmental information is pattern completion. Your brain is not evaluating each economic data point as new information. It's comparing it to recent memory and asking one question. Did something catastrophic happen the last time I saw signals like these? For most people in April 2026, the honest answer is no. Prices went haywire in 2022. Interest rates climbed sharply. Things felt genuinely uncertain for a long stretch, and then the worst predictions didn't materialize. You adapted. Your budget stretched. Life continued. Your brain cataloged that sequence and filed it as the default template for how economic uncertainty resolves. This is normalcy bias operating exactly as designed. It's not a cognitive flaw. It's your brain conserving mental resources by not treating every fluctuation as a genuine emergency. The problem is that this mechanism creates a specific, predictable blind spot at the beginning of actual turning points, the precise moments when accurate threat assessment matters most. Layer optimism bias on top of that, the documented tendency to systematically underestimate the probability of negative outcomes that haven't occurred in your own experience. And you have a cognitive combination that makes the early stages of a downturn nearly invisible to the people living inside it. Not because they aren't paying attention, because their brains are doing exactly what brains were built to do. Picture a Tuesday morning in April 2026. Your alarm goes off. You check your phone, see a headline about treasury yields, and swipe past it without reading past the first 3 words. You stop for gas on the way in. The price is noticeably higher than it was last fall, but not shocking enough to feel like a crisis. You've normalized it. Somewhere in your city, 3 small businesses filed paperwork this week to wind down operations. In your zip code, 2 people quietly accepted lower-paying jobs because the positions they were actually qualified for stopped materializing. A credit card company logged a new batch of delinquencies that will appear in a Federal Reserve report 6 weeks from now. The bond market shifted another fraction in a direction institutional traders noted immediately. None of it touched your Tuesday. Your morning felt normal. And yet all 5 signals ticked upward in the background while you lived your completely unremarkable day. That's not negligence. That's precisely how economic turning points operate. They don't arrive as announcements. They accumulate in the spaces between ordinary moments. The people who miss these signals most completely are not the ones you'd expect. Research from Cornell University's Behavioral Economics Lab, published in 2023, found that the demographic most likely to underestimate early economic warning signals shares 3 characteristics: stable employment in the prior 18 months, no significant personal financial loss during the 2008 recession, and high daily consumption of general news media. That last finding is the one that surprises people. More news does not produce more accurate threat assessment. It produces more exposure to noise, which paradoxically reduces sensitivity to genuine signal. And when the signal finally does register clearly, your brain's response creates its own set of problems. When the brain registers economic threat, it shifts into the same mode it uses for physical danger. Cortisol elevates. Your time horizon collapses. Decision-making capacity decreases precisely when you need it most. You stop evaluating outcomes over years and start evaluating them over days. In that state, the financial decisions that feel most rational are frequently the ones that do the most damage. There are 2 ways people fail when an economic alarm sounds. The first is ignoring it completely, normalizing every signal until the contraction is deeply underway and options have narrowed. The second is reacting immediately and impulsively, treating early signals as confirmation that the worst-case outcome is imminent and certain. Both failure modes share one feature. Neither is a response to what's actually happening. Both are responses to fear wearing different costumes. A comprehensive study from Morningstar covering investor behavior between 2000 and 2024 found that individuals who made significant portfolio changes during the first 3 months of an identified economic slowdown underperformed simple buy and hold strategies by an average of 3.1% annually over the following 5 years. The instinct to do something, to regain control over an uncontrollable situation, has a measurable price. And the people who paid it most consistently were not reckless. They were anxious, attentive, and responding exactly as their nervous systems told them to. Your hypervigilance is trying to protect you. It is also capable of sabotaging you. Those two things are not contradictory. They're the same wiring doing two jobs simultaneously. That tension doesn't resolve on its own. It has to be managed deliberately. Research from the University of Chicago found that households who maintained a simple written financial contingency plan during the 2020 economic disruption experienced 40% less anxiety and made significantly fewer impulsive financial decisions than those without one. Not a complex plan, not a prediction, a specific document that answered one question. When X happens, I will do Y. When gas prices cross a threshold, I've decided in advance, I redirect that savings to my emergency fund. When my investment account drops by a defined percentage, I don't look at it again for 30 days. The plan doesn't need to be right about what happens. It needs to exist before your cortisol spikes. The second strategy is an information diet applied with intention. A 2022 study from Yale found that people who consumed economic news more than twice daily during periods of market volatility experienced 45% higher stress levels, with no corresponding improvement in their actual financial outcomes. Checking economic indicators once daily at a fixed time you choose in advance removes the reinforcement loop that keeps your threat detection system in continuous activation. The third strategy is the least glamorous and the most consistently supported by longitudinal data. Emergency funds covering at least 6 months of essential expenses. Debt reduction prioritized over speculative positioning. Income sources that don't all depend on a single employer or sector. A 2023 study from the National Bureau of Economic Research tracking households through 3 economic contractions found that these 3 structural factors predicted financial resilience more reliably than investment strategy, income level, or economic forecasting accuracy. The boring fundamentals are boring because they work regardless of what the signals end up meaning. You are not broken for missing these 5 signs until now. You are not financially naive. You are not paranoid for feeling that something is off. Your brain was doing exactly what it evolved to do. But you also live in April 2026, not in the environment your nervous system was designed for. The people who navigate economic turning points most effectively are not the ones who predicted them earliest. They are the ones who, once aware, chose their response deliberately instead of reactively. If that quiet hum of something wrong has been sitting in your gut for a while and you couldn't name it, now you can. Drop a comment below. Let's talk about what economic uncertainty actually feels like to live inside, instead of pretending we're all rational actors with perfectly calibrated risk assessments. We're not. And understanding that is the beginning of a better response.